In this video, we're going to look at how you take your infrared data that you may have downloaded from the machine, or your XRD data. You've downloaded them, you've got them onto an Excel spreadsheet as just a little bit of data. But what you really want to do is get all the bits of data. Let's say you've got 5 samples. You want to collect all the data from the 5 samples, put them into the one Excel spreadsheet. So you don't want lots of Excel spreadsheets. How to put all the data together, and then how to draw the graphs. And so this is what I'm going to show you. So first of all, let's get your data. So I'm going to go find the data, and here's my set of data. So it's a sample 1, sample 1A, sample 2, sample 2A, and so forth down here. So I'm going to open the first one. I'm going to open is sample 1A, and I'm going to move it over here. There's sample 1A, and there's already a graph there because there's already some data. So I'm going to turn to maximize it first, and I'm going to save it. I'm going to save as, but I'm going to call it a different name. So at the moment there's sample 1, like I said, sample 2, and so forth. I'm going to call it something like all data, and say save. All, because this is all infrared data. I'm going to call it all FTIR data. Save that. Now I've got at the bottom of the Excel spreadsheet, you'll see it says chart 1 and sample 1. That's because this one's sample 1. If I click chart 1, it shows the chart, and if I click sample 1, it shows the data. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rename sample 1. I'm going to call it data. But before I do that, actually, I'm going to go create a top column. I'm going to insert a couple of lines at the top. I'm doing it this way round because I don't want to forget that it's called sample 1. So here, I think the first column here, this is the wave number, comma centimeters to the -1, and I'll make that column wider, and also I'll make it centered. So there we are, wave number centimeters -1, and this is absorbance, and I'll make that one slightly wider too. Now this data set is from sample 1, so I'm going to write above sample 1. Okay, so we now know this is sample 1, so I can get rid of this one, this data here, this thing here, and I can rename it, and I'm going to recall it data. The reason I'm going to do this is become clear in a moment, because I'm going to put all my data onto this one Excel spreadsheet. So I'm going to make that one nice and center it. So we've got sample 1, wave number, and absorbance. Chart 1 we'll leave for a moment, but we'll come back to what the graph looks like in a moment. But there's our data. Then go back to my files, and we've done sample 1. The next one is it says sample 1A, so I'm going to click that one. Again, I've got a graph. Not going to worry about the graph at the moment, just going to go to the data. The data is already selected. I know it's sample 1A. I'm going to copy and paste it. So copy, and I'm going to go back to the other one, the all FTIR data spreadsheet, and then I'm going to paste it in. I might leave a bit of a gap between them, maybe 2 columns gap, and I'm going to paste it in. I'll copy those over because they mean the same, like this. Make the columns wider. In fact, I'll just block everything as being center, like this. So now it's all centered. I'll make that a bit wider. Okay, this is now called sample 1A. Okay, so there's sample 1, there's sample 1A. I'm going to carry on, and I'm going to add a few more samples to this data set. So I'll go back to where my folder was. Now I'm on to sample 2, it says. Open that one up. Same thing again. Go into here. This time it's not blocked, so I'm going to block it all. There's a long way of doing this, which is this way, and there's a short way. I'm just going to do the long way. There we go. Copy. Remember the name is sample 2. I go back into this one. Leave 2 columns. There we go. And label it sample 2. 2. And I'll copy those over. Control C, Control V. Okay, make these wider. It should have automatically centered these. I don't know why it didn't. So I'll do that. Okay, so we've got sample 2. I know the next one's sample 2A. I think I'm just going to import 4 files and stop there because you'll understand what I'm doing. So I'll go back to the next one, which is the data file, Maria Laird. The next one is sample 2A. Get my data. Let's block all that down. Like I said, there is a shortcut way of doing this. It's some control something and you can block the whole text. Copy, go back to all data, and then put it in. And this is sample 2A. Sample 2A. Copy and paste across. And then take it and center it. Right, so I've got all my data there. I'll make it a bit smaller so you can see. There we go. Sample 1A, sample 1, sample 1A, sample 2, sample 2A. They're all on the same spreadsheet called data. At this point, what I would do is I'd close down all the other Excel spreadsheets, because you don't need them anymore, because you've got everything you need on this one. Now if you've got 10 samples you've done, then I would repeat this for all the 10 samples. If you've got 20, I'd repeat it all for the 20 samples. It makes for a large data sheet, but Excel is designed to actually contain a lot of information, and actually the information that we're putting in is relatively small. If you think of some databases, they're enormous. So here is all our data. Now at this point, this is where you need to go and think about the graphs. So let's go back to chart 1. At the moment, chart 1 is linked to the data for sample 1. So if we click it, then I don't think it says it up there. Might do. No, it doesn't. So another way to check where the data is from is if you put your cursor into the graph, right click, select data, that it's got series 1, and it goes back to the spreadsheet, and you can see that it's selected. I'll move up to the top. It's selected sample 1. So we know that graph is from sample 1. In a moment, we're going to do things with sample 1A, sample 2, sample 2A, but let's concentrate on sample 1 and the graph for sample 1. So I'll say OK for the moment there. Let's go back to this. So first thing is you need to put in the axes. So we've got wave numbers at the bottom and we've got absorbance going at the top. So if I go to format, where's it, design, I can never remember on this, design, view, let's try again. Because I've got a new version of Excel, everything's different. So let's move this up. There should be one which is saying something about the axes titles. Design, view, it's usually on design. I don't know what that symbol means. What does that one mean? So series, that's painting. Right, click format plot area. I'm not sure, let's have a look. I think what I'm going to do for a moment is I'm going to pause this video, find where that right, we've Okay, hopefully we've restarted now. So what we're going to do is I found where it is. It's on design and it's on add chart element. So there it is. And if we go down, we can see axes titles. So let's do axes title down here, and we're going to write in there wave number, centimeters to the -1. So we've done that. It's up to you. If you want to, you can put to the -1 on it by formatting. I'm making a superscript, but I'll just leave it like that for the moment because I quite like doing that, but everything's changed on this version, so I'll leave it at that for the moment. Go back to design, add chart element, axis titles, and then let's put absorbance on here. Absorbance. Okay. Now you'll notice at the moment got absorbance here, wave number here, there's my graph here. When you're giving any reports, people like using colour, but the fact is that when we publish it, unless it really means something, it's better to give graphs in black and white. Particularly because the colour, if you've got a graph in red and then a blue, then it implies that there's something different between the red and the blue. But it's better really just to show them all in black. So I'm going to change the colour of this now into black. And so it's this format date series, maybe it's that one there, and it's got some colour options here. So this is line, I can say solid line, and the line colour is black. We might change the width at the moment to 1.5. We might change the width a bit later. It depends. It depends on what the graph is going into. It's got to be clear basically. So now it's in black, and it's from 0 at the moment. It's 0 to 4,000. It goes a bit up to. There's a bit of redundant space here up to 4,500. So I think I'll probably make the scale a bit different. So I'm going to click that bit here. Can you see where I've clicked it in this area? You get this little rectangular box. You click in that box. You right click it. You format axis. And then you go, and it's got maximum, minimum. Well, the maximum I'm going to say is 4,000. So, and return, and there you can see it's displayed at up to 4,000. I could make this start at 400, which is where the infrared starts, but then it ends up with a funny scale at the bottom, so it's kind of a bit easier to read it going up in 500s. The next thing I would do is the numbers, where you can see here, they're a bit small. So I'm going to make them bigger. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to format axis, and maybe not be on this one. I've got the format axis here, number, category, number, general. It's actually the font size really. So let's try that again. It may be format font. Font, there we go. Font, and I'm going to change that. I'm going to make it 14. It might be too big, but let's have a look. No, I think I'm happy with that. So it's quite easy and visible. The only thing is it's grey, and I'm going to change it, the font to the colour to be black and white, like that. And that's a bit clearer. So now I've got the bottom scale tidied up a bit, but what you need in all graphs are tick marks. I always go on about students for this, because how can you tell where 600 or 700 is? So you need a tick mark where the 0 is, the 500 and 1000, but in between these numbers you also need tick marks as a guide. So I'm going to click that one again, left click it to get the rectangular box, and then over here it's got tick marks. I go down and it says major and minor, got none, so I'm going to put them, if you put them inside, the tick marks will appear in the graph, but I prefer them outside, sticking out, and the minor ones we're going to put outside as well. And we haven't specified what the minor ones are, but it's automatically done it for us. So can you see the units here? A major tick marks at 500, minor ones are at 1,000. The only problem with them at the moment is they're not very visible, so they need to be made darker. And let's go down to the paint thing again, solid line here, and it's saying it's on 0.75, so I think we can make these a bit darker, maybe up to 2.5 actually there, and I'd change the colour to being black and white. And now it's on black and white, I'd actually change this down a bit, maybe 1.75 is enough. So now it looks quite nice. The bottom scale looks nice. Alright, wave number now looks tiny, so at that point I will go back into the wave number. I would select the area, go to home and make it bigger, and maybe we'll make this, I don't know what it's going to look like, but maybe make it 18. Okay, wave number is 18. It's grey and I want it black and white. So we're having to make these changes and it looks quite fiddly, but in actual fact once you've done it for one graph I'll be able to show you that it's just you can just copy all the formatting for the next graph. So we've got a colour on this, and font colour at the moment is grey, font colour I'm going to make that black and white. So oh no, it didn't like that. Try it again. Font colour, it says it's black and white. Right, it is black. There we go. So wave number there. Sample up here. You can leave it there. Sometimes I move it down a bit. You can move it where you want. This axis will move up, you see, so you can have more of the page. I'll just close that one down for a moment. There you are. There's the whole graph. I can't make that any bigger, so that's fine. So let's look at this absorbance, because we need to do similar sorts of things to this scale as we did for this one. So we'll go left click to get the little box, right click, format axes, and we've got here a couple of things first of all we could look at, but let's go to tick marks. So tick marks outside, tick marks outside. They've got tick marks going up with the absorbance on the inside. I'm less bothered about the absolute absorbance value. I'm more bothered about the absolute wave number value. But nevertheless, there's tick marks at the moment going up every 0.2, I think, 2, 4, yeah, every 0.2. But it's too small, isn't it? And it's grey. So let's see what we've got down here. And we got axes options. There's the paint. The line, we want a solid line. We want it to be black and white. We want it to be bigger. I can't remember. Do we do 1.75 for the other one? They should be the same. These should be the same thickness of those ones. Here, 1.75, and that's all we can do. So we go back over to here, click the area, font, I think we said it was 18, and we've given it black and white. Let's say OK. No, I don't think it was 18 on that one. Let's have a look. Let's click back font, and it said 14. So let's make this 14. Font 14. So now we've got that font 14, that font 14. This one was the font was 18. So we need to change this absorbance. We need to change format axis format. Let's see. We need to change the font to 14. And we need to change it to black. Okay. Check that one. That was 18. So I can't remember, can I? This is 18 should be. I'm blocking it by doing Control A to block it, and then a right click, press font, change that to 18. Right, so at this point we've got an infrared graph. It looks like it sort of looks like the one we get from the machine, but there's a couple of things that still need to be changed, and one of them is at the moment it goes from left to right, it goes from 0 to 4,000, but we know that on the machine it goes from left is 4,000 down to 0, so we need to reverse it. So if you click the horizontal axis to get the little box, rectangular box, and then right click that, so right click and go format axes, you'll get this box up, and there's a little box down here which says values in reverse order. So I'm going to click that one, and there we are, we've got it in reverse order, and then this is looking much closer to what you'd see on the infrared spectra. You can see it goes down to minus 0.1. Well, there's no need for it to do so, so I'm going to go on here on the, not the horizontal this time, but I'm going to do the on the vertical axis, and at the moment it says minus 0.1. I'm just going to make that 0.0. And now when you look at the graph, now it's looking again much more closer to what you're expecting. I'll move that label over there, so there. That label's in grey. I don't know, I'll just change it to font to black again. Okay, so that's now black. Now the other thing I like, so I'd like you to do, is to get rid of these grid bars. So the grid bars, you can click the grid bars. Well, you used to be able to click the grid bars, maybe you're not anymore. Let's go back to design. Let's see what quick load. Grid lines. So go to add chart element, grid lines, and then say primary horizontal grid line. I clicked it and it disappeared. Go again to grid lines, and I'm going to do the same. The vertical, they've all, that's click it and they've gone. So you basically need to remove those grid lines. You don't need them because you've got all the tick marks. Sometimes it's helpful to have the grid lines, but I prefer, when displaying graphs, especially for papers and stuff, I prefer not to have them. But one thing I do like to have is I like to have this continuous border. So I'm going to click in the graph here, and when you click in you get a border, but when you click out again it disappears. So you've got to define the border. So click in it again, and then it comes up with border, and you need to say solid line, give it the colour, and give it a one that's the same sort of darkness as the other bits. So there it is, it's got a solid line. You're almost done. What you can't tell is if you export this into a Word diagram, you'll suddenly find that there's a second border which is out here on your picture, and it doesn't look very nice. So you need to get rid of that second border. So click in the area above the graph, and then go, and it'll be for this border here, and then go no line, and then that should disappear. There we are, it's kind of gone, and that is your graph. It's wonderful. So you're now thinking, oh my goodness, you know, do I have to do all those settings for everything else? And the good news is, no, you don't. You've pretty much done it all now on this one. So watch what I'm going to do. It says chart 1 at the moment, so I'm going to click it, right click it, and rename the name, and I'm going to call it sample 1 because that's what it says, sample 1 on here. Alright, I'm now going to do something which I'm going to right click, I'm going to go move or copy, click create a copy, and say OK. And now these two are the same, it's just one is a copy of the other. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm copying the graph formatting, because I'm going, can you see what it says sample 1, 2? I'm going to replace the data in this graph with the next set of data. So what do I mean by that? I go back to my data, I've got sample 1, and the next one is sample 1A. So I'm going to call this, rename it, right click on there, rename sample 1A. So I've called that sample 1A, and now what I want to do is it's still sample 1's data, so I need to swap the data that's on here for sample 1A. So because these two are still identical at the moment, sample 1, sample 1A, but I want sample 1A to have 1A's data. So I go into the graph, I right click, and I do select data, and at the moment it's series 1, and if I edit it and look at these X values, they're all on sample 1. But I'm going to instead go down to the X values, which is this lot here, for sample 1A, and I'm going to block down to the bottom. Get down there, click back into this grid, and I've got go now to the series Y values, click it, and they are on the first set of data, but now I'm going to move them over to the second. And you do that, click that grid, and the last thing, you can call it a series name if you want, because it's sample sample 1A, if you want to call it, and then you say OK, and then finally say OK again. So now this is sample 1A, so you need to, this one I'll change it to sample 1A, I'll remove that PH7, put sample 1A, and this, I'll remove that 7, is sample 1. Now sample 1A, I know, and sample 1 were made under similar conditions, so they're going to look similar, but if I switch between them, you'll see there's some differences between this sample 1, sample 2, sample 1, sample 2. Sorry, sample 1, sample 1A, sample 1, sample 1A. So this is great. So you've got both those graphs in. So we've got 4 sets of data. So we're going to do the next one. I won't do them all, but I'll do one more. So you go on sample 1A, you go move a copy, create a copy, OK. Look at what the data is, and our next data is sample 2. So we go to sample, this tab here, rename it sample 2. Now it's sample 2, but all the graph is still looking like sample 1A. So you go into the graph, I'll rename that one 2 whilst we're at it. Right click, select data, sample 1A, edit. It's no longer sample 1A, it's sample 2. Funny quote things get in the way. X value. Now you'll notice that the X values are all the same, but you never really can tell. And just in case they're not, I always select them. You notice I haven't gone down to 4002 because it's shot past 4002, and it's going from absorbance in 0.0371 to 0. So I'm just sticking to going to 4000. We go to the Y data and do the same, just making sure it goes down to 4000. Okay, there we go. And we say OK, and OK. This is sample 2. So now what we've got is sample 1, sample 1A, sample 2. They're all looking pretty similar. 1A and this one, and sample 2. Now you'll notice something about sample 2, and that is that 1 and 1A, the box doesn't move. The data moves a little bit because the absorbance, one says absorbance 0.8 and the other gets up to 0.7. But when you go to sample 2, it's moved because it's recording to lots of decimal places. So, and we just want to keep it simple to, I think on this one here, just a 1 decimal place. There's 1 decimal place, there's 1 decimal place, there's 1 decimal place. So let's see if we can do that. If we go to axis options, it might be held somewhere else. So I'll look down here, arrow type, text options. No, I think what we'll do is we go to, this is sample 2, we'll go to the data, because there's something I need to show you on the data. Sample 2, here I can see that there's different decimal places on this one here. That sometimes it gives us 0.02. We need to make sure it's all consistent up and down these rows. So I'm going to click sample B, right click it, I'm going to format cell, oh, I've cleared it by mistake, right click it, format cells, I'm going to call it a number, and because it's absorbance, I think, and because the absorbance goes up to 1, I think it's okay to give it to 1 decimal place. So let's have a look. I might need to give it to 2. Now maybe I'll just give it to 2 decimal places. So do it again. Format cells, number, 2 decimal places. Okay, so I've done 2 decimal places for absorbance, and I'll do the same for this one here. Cleared it. Right click, format cells, number, 2 decimal places, OK, and I do the same for this one. Number, format cells, number 2 decimal places. Once I've done that, I go back to look at sample 2, and you'll notice now sample 2 has gone to 2 decimal places. Sample 1A has gone 1, and that's gone to 2, and this has gone to, now it's gone to 2. So 1, 1A, 2, they're all in the same box, so you can directly compare the spectra. And you can see there are some subtle differences, but there's not a great deal of difference. Now, one of the things I'll last do is this data box, if you left click it and hold it, you can move it. So you can alter the order and things. And normally I put the data as being the first tab, and then it's up to you what you want to do here, but you could or reorder it. So sample 1 comes there, and then you've got sample 2A and then 2. It's up to you, but you need to order it, but it's best if you have the data first, or I prefer it anyway. So that's giving you some, hopefully, if you watch this and watch it carefully, there's quite a lot of operations to do, but once you've set up one graph, then it's very easy just to import the data and set up all the other graphs. And that's the end of this video.